Gentle parenting, that is a loaded, loaded word. So we have some people saying it's just an excuse to be permissive and the kids aren't learning boundaries. Kids need discipline. And then it's also just a really trendy word and something we should strive for and something in between. There's people who love it, people who hate it, people who try to pull from it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about gentle parenting from a pediatric provider and parent approach who's really in the thick of it. I have a very strong-willed 5-year-old who I'm just going to tell you pushes my buttons. He knows how to push my buttons. And at Target the other week, I had to pick him up and we had to carry him out because I was holding a boundary that we're not going to buy a toy today. And I think sometimes people who are trying to gentle parent end up being scared to have natural consequences or end up being scared to, I don't love the word discipline, but discipline. And there is a way to incorporate gentle parenting in a way that still teaches our children lessons. We still are the parent. We are not their best friend. We want to be their friend, and hopefully, I will say my mom is my best friend. So if we do this correctly as an adult, we can have a really strong relationship with our children. But when our children are little, we are there to be the parent and there to model for them. So let's talk through a couple of things. I'm Kelsey Baas, pediatric physical therapist. I work alongside with quite a few amazing play therapists and counselors who've been helping me navigate this with my strong-willed 5-year-old. So what is gentle parenting that we should definitely be incorporating in our everyday life? I think the most important piece of it is teaching our children how to regulate, teaching our children how to manage emotions, and teaching children that emotions are okay. So in kind of old-fashioned models where we would just spank or yell, or more authoritarian models of parenting, we're not teaching those lessons. We're not teaching them how to manage emotions, and we're teaching them to hide the emotions. We're not teaching them that they're okay. And we all have emotions. I love Inside Out. Like, definitely watch Inside Out with your kids. Learning to name emotions is so important. And so that's one of the things that I want everyone to take away from gentle parenting is emotions are okay and normal. As adults, are we happy every single day? Do we come home every day after work and be like, I have a smile on my face, let's go for a run, and I want to play a game? No, but we expect our kids to be that. We expect our kids to go to school all day and then come home and just not have a moment of frustration or not act out a little bit. And they are younger than us. Their brains are not mature. And so naming emotions is one of the first most important things you can do. If they come home from school, instead of saying, oh, I don't want to hear you whine, you can say, oh, it sounds like you had a hard day today. Can you tell me more about that? I love the car ride home from school, and I can immediately tell where my son is. Like, sometimes he pops in happy, wants to chat, and sometimes he wants silence. He'll ask me to turn off the music, and I'm not allowed to say anything on the drive home. But you need to respect that. We can't force them to talk about their day. We need to let them come to us. I think something else with gentle parenting that it gets a bad rap sometimes is just that it's permissive parenting. We're letting kids do whatever they want. We can give choice and we can give autonomy, but we can also set boundaries. And setting healthy boundaries is incredibly important. And so we definitely set boundaries in our family. We are not getting a toy today, or I am not going to force you to be in the clean plate club, but what we made for dinner is what we have on the table. And so we are not doing there's a punishment if you don't clear your plate, but we also are not doing we are going to make 3 different meals for every single person at the table. We have set a boundary that my husband and I have worked hard to cook a meal. That's the option, and they can choose how much of it they want to eat. Other boundaries are safety. That's one of the most important boundaries to keep. And so we're working hard on looking both ways on our bikes. We're holding hands in parking lots. And if we can't follow safety, we're going to have to leave. I think one of the hardest things about these boundaries is sometimes it affects what we want to do as parents as well. So in a more authoritarian role, it's going to be like, you're going to behave at this restaurant, or you're going to have this big consequence when you get home. And they're scared of that consequence, so they might behave in that moment. There's a lot of long-term implications that I'll let our counselors talk about if we're always parenting that way. And how we practice is we need to follow these boundaries that we have set. And Unfortunately, if he's not following the boundaries, then sometimes we have to leave, which is definitely a natural consequence for our son. A lot of times he does not want to leave, but then it's also a consequence as a parent because we're there with friends or we're enjoying it or we were looking forward to that dinner out. And so if you're doing it correctly, it can be challenging for the parent as well. You need to set boundaries that you're willing to enforce. If you're not going to enforce that boundary, don't even set it. But if you are willing to enforce that boundary, create it for that activity and have a natural consequence if they don't follow that boundary, whether that be leaving or they have to stay with you. They're not allowed to go in the bounce house by themselves, whatever the boundary you decide is appropriate as a parent. I think with gentle parenting, something else that we don't fully take the time to educate families on is how our brain works. And our basic needs have to be met before we can regulate our emotions. And so if our children are not getting good sleep, not getting good nutrition, not feeling safe, if those needs are not met, we are going to have behaviors that are trying to meet those needs. And so as a parent, we really need to look at a child if they're having a meltdown and be like, hey, are all of our needs being met right now? Some of our worst behavior weeks, I've looked back and I'm like, man, I scheduled something for us every single night, which means we rushed through bedtime every night. So we got less bedtime stories, less connection at night, and we didn't get as quality of sleep. And now I'm mad at my child because he's acting out or he's yelling or showing dysregulated behaviors. Well, if we're looking at that retrospectively, I contributed to that. As a 5-year-old, he is not ready to be that busy or to accommodate to less sleep. And so let's look at those basic needs and make sure those needs are met before we're quick to anger. The other thing to think about is we need to get them safe. So I personally do not always let my child have meltdowns in the middle of Target. I will pick him up and we will leave. And then I let him regulate in the car or let him regulate when we get home. So I think I've seen all sorts of reels and memes on Instagram of people making fun of gentle parenting, and there'll be kids just like throwing food in the aisles at the grocery store. And the mom is just saying, well, how do you feel about that? And gentle parenting does not mean we have to let that happen. So I will pick my child up. We will go to the car and then I don't yell. We talk about it. I let him calm down and we ultimately might have a natural consequence. Usually it's we left and we don't get to do the activity. So it does not mean just letting children have major outbursts. If your child's having big outbursts on a recurring basis, and these simple methods are not helping, that's when you might want to look into some extra support or extra help. Pediatric occupational therapists and pediatric counselors can teach you as a family how to regulate together and methods to assist with those outbursts. Gentle parenting does not mean tolerating every behavior. So hopefully this gives some examples of boundary setting. And if you want a little motivation, I needed some motivation. I was down about some behavior the other week. And a counselor I really admire, the counselor at my son's school, was doing a parent coffee. And she has 2 children who I've known for a long time. They were some of the first supporters of our clinic, and they're teenagers. And they are some of the most respectful teenagers I have ever met. They come, they don't get out their phones. They can hold a conversation with an adult. They behave appropriately, at least when other adults are around. I don't know what they do on their nights out, but I just adore this family. And I had been just kind of a little bit down and even embarrassed. I think it's okay to say we get embarrassed if our child is the one yelling in the middle of Target. You're wondering, what am I doing wrong to cause this? And she said something that really spoke to me. She said, when my children were little, I was jealous of the families who were behaving. We were at a restaurant and all the children were behaving perfectly. And she said, but at the same time, I knew a lot of those kids were behaving because they were scared and they didn't feel safe. And she talked about how her daughter, when she was little, would throw every toy out in her room. And the boundary was, if you're upset, if that's how you handle your emotion, we're not going to break anything and you're going to pick it up. And if you break something, I'm not going to pay to replace it. And just that weekend, my 5-year-old had gone into his room when he was mad at me because I held a boundary, and he threw his stuffed animals everywhere. And I was just like, man, what am I doing that this is happening? And hearing her having come out on the other end say, we lived this, and they do ultimately go to restaurants. They do ultimately start to act a little more respectful was so validating. And you really never know what's going on inside a child's head. So try not to compare, try not to get jealous. Find out what works for your family. And that may be less outings. That may be your child always has a fidget to regulate. That's where individualized help can come in to help find out what works for you and your family. And we've gone through phases where we just couldn't do everything we wanted. And now we're able to start adding activities back in. So what do you think about gentle parenting? Are you pro gentle parenting? Are you anti gentle parenting? We would love to hear in the comments below.